I'm so glad to be here with all of you and to be talking with Niela Miller, who graduated from Antioch in 1957 and has had a very interesting life so far. When I try to describe Niela, I come up with characteristics that would seem to be talking about two very different people. For example, how could someone who is so imaginative and expansive be so organized and practical? Niela calls herself a creativist, and she has a knack for mobilizing others to step outside their usual patterns of thinking and experience their own creative possibilities. So Niela, first tell us about where you grew up, what happened to who you were before Antioch, and how is it you got to Antioch?
Well, I grew up with parents who valued the arts and education. And my mother was a dancer, a writer, a painter. And my father had a beautiful tenor voice and knew all the songs of that era. He also had a trio with his two brothers. He played the violin. And he read the dictionary like people read novels. He loved words. And he introduced me to poetry and to reciting poetry, reading it out loud. So when I was very young, I was already starting to get a feeling for performance. Both of them loved books, of course. And then my aunt was my piano teacher. And another friend of the family was also my piano teacher. And my aunt and my mom took me to all the original Broadway musicals. I still remember them vividly.
Lucky girl.
My mom could not afford college when she was young, but graduated from Hunter College at the age of 77 with honors and wrote a couple of books while she was there. So that's a feeling for my family. You know, I was born with a set of genes, right? I went to a special camp in the Catskills called Woodland, which launched me as a performer at their wonderful Catskill folk festivals. And I also started playing guitar and performing in various locations. Pete Seeger was connected with the camp and was a strong influence on me as a performer who connected with his audience, made them part of what is happening, and used his gifts in the service of higher values. And one of the many unusual things about this camp is that it was fully integrated back in the 40s. For more, get a book called The Improbable Community by Bill Horn, spelled with an E on the end. I went to the High School of Music and Art. I applied on piano and was a voice major. Kids from all races and backgrounds were there. 1948 to 1952. So, you know, you can already tell I have very unusual upbringing, and the schools that I went to, everyone where I went was integrated. We loved and respected each other's talents and differences. Diane Carroll was a classmate of mine, and she told me that she was going to be famous, and voila. I mean, I knew that this gal was going places. A personal high point was conducting the Brahms Requiem in a public concert and getting great reviews. Conducting, where you have to pay attention to many elements all at the same time, taught me a great deal about working with groups later. And I certainly applied that knowledge in many ways. I heard about Antioch from a neighbor girl. We lived in a big apartment building in the Bronx. And I looked it up, and when I saw that they had a major called Creative Arts, I applied immediately. I mean, there weren't other colleges who were offering this kind of major. And I was so happy because I didn't have to choose just one art. I wanted to be able to do as many things. as possible. So I immediately applied. Oh, frabjeste colluculae, I got accepted right away. Years later, I tracked down my entrance paper and also my senior paper. It's such fun to read about who I was at the time, and I could see the threads of who I became just running right through that. So we can go on to the next question.
Okay. Tell us about the time, your time at Antioch, some of the people who were important to you. And then Susan has some photographs from that time, and she needs to be cued about when you want what photograph. So
Great.
Niela at Antioch, here we go.
So my first husband, my college husband, Malin Halleck, and I lived in an attached apartment with the Lithgows at 358 Dayton Street. I still remember. Occasionally I'd babysit with Johnny Lithgow, and Arthur, his dad, was someone I greatly admired for this wonderful project that he was doing, this Shakespeare Under the Stars. I even just loved the name of it, which was going on when I first came to the campus. And I just felt so lucky to have my years at Antioch coincide with that festival. I had bit parts in 7 of the Shakespeare productions, and then I did a lot of other things. Someone had found out I'd gone to music and art and knew how to do various music tasks. So I was asked to compose horn calls for the entrances of royalty and to coach the New York actors in singing Elizabethan songs, because they were all singing like Frank Sinatra, And to this day, I love to do Cleopatra's monologue, I Dreamed There Was an Emperor Antony, which was part of a Shakespeare theater workshop for students who were connected with the festival. It was such a special time. The very first production I was in, soon after I arrived in Antioch, was a theater workshop piece called Saints Pavilion, and I was hooked. A few months later, I was in a major production of The Devil's Disciple with Meredith Dallas, who was known as Dal, and more about Dal later, and Barry's his daughter. I played Mrs. Dudgeon, and you can show that photo now, Susan. Yeah, I'm the mean-looking one. I mean, I'm only 18 there, but I'm playing a much older lady. And that's Davy Jones with me there. He got to be quite well known. He wrote some musicals and has done a whole bunch of stuff. And after that, I was in a lot of productions and played leads in the House of Bernarda Alba, A View from the Bridge, Shaw's Arms and the Man, in the early days of the Trotwood Circle Theater, which was like a community theater with mainly farm people in the audience that first year, and other student actors from Antioch. So acting just felt like a natural mode of creative expression for me. And it was the one art form that nobody in my family had done. So I could separate myself from them somehow. Now, Paul, I want to talk about Paul Treikerler's production of Bernarda Alba, where you can show those photos. It stands out as a work of genius to me that he gave us. I think, if you see this stage, this was just genius. So we had to, when we walked up this thing, we walked in certain rhythms. This is a whole family of girls whose mother is very strict about a year of mourning after she has lost her husband. Show the other picture. Do you see? I'm in the back, in the center. I'm the youngest sister. My name was Adela, and I would sneak out against the rules and meet up with a boy. It did not come to a good ending. The House of Bernarda Alba by Federico Garcia Lorca. Look it up if you want to. Anyway, Treichler did a fantastic job with that play. I learned so many things about the embodiment of a character and the creating of atmosphere. It was really powerful. I also clearly remember learning from Paul about how people moved in the Elizabethan age and practicing it all over the campus, the curves and so on. And he had all sorts of avant-garde ideas and was certainly an inspiration to me. You know, I have dozens of stories about everything, and I had to figure out how to put 87 years into 50 minutes. It's impossible. Louise, I know you had that problem last month too. In my senior year, I was in Arthur Miller's View from the Bridge, directed by Dow. I was 7 months pregnant, so the script had to be slightly revised, and that became one of the motivators for Eddie Carboni's character, played by Dick Surmely, to act in the egregious way that he did. I don't have time to tell you the whole plot of the thing, but please show those pictures. There I am in the center. And I am 7 months pregnant with my first daughter, Andrea. I have a little story. One day at rehearsal, Dick Surmely, who was playing my husband, pushed me down into a chair, and I burst out crying. I was sobbing. It was much more than the character was called for by this character. And Dow, darling Dow, took me outside, sat down with me, and I got to get a taste of what a wonderful counselor he was. And he encouraged me to use the basic feelings I was having, which came from some kind of fight that I had with my husband, to make my character even stronger. We bonded around this, and years later, Dow came to a Gestalt group for couples that I was leading to get some training, and subsequently went to the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland to study Gestalt therapy. So we had a full circle experience, teacher-student experience. We attended AHP conferences, Association for Humanistic Psychology conferences. We had many discussions and letter writing over the years. I have a whole bunch of letters, and I sent copies to Tony Dallas, who's on this call. We shared our passion for theater, creative writing, and therapy, and how they were all connected, dream work particularly. For my senior project, I directed a play called Dark Wind, Light Wind at the Shakespeare Outdoor Stage, written by my Antioch theater friend, Kate Kelly, later Gilmore. I incorporated a lot of my creative arts background, music, stage design, choreography, and a dozen other elements that are part of a complex production. Ollie Loud, who was a science professor at Antioch, my friends, we have friends here on this call and Antiochians. So you may not have heard of some of these people. I'll try to quickly identify them. He played the king, and he also had a great influence on me. His pedagogy was outstanding. He had people in his science class find something which really interested them and embark on a broad exploration. For me, it was stage lighting. And I ended up doing the lighting for a play called The Moon is Blue at the Springfield Civic Theater. And we used, those Lycos, those lights in those days that you put color gels on. And many elements had to be considered in the design, the atmosphere, the visibility, the changes of scene, et cetera. Excuse me while I just take a drink of water. Please remember that if you have questions or I'm talking about something you don't know what I'm talking about, just put your question in the chat. We'll get to those later. Throughout my creative arts time at Antioch, I was taking writing classes with Niela Miller and sharing that with Mark Strand, who became a poet laureate, and some other people who became professional writers. I was making jewelry and other art. I was participating in modern dance classes and performances. And I was being coached in conducting by Piero Bellugi, an Italian conductor who wanted me to forget all the American conducting that I'd been taught at music and art and do the European type of conducting. Oy vey.
What's the difference?
Oh my God. I mean, I can't go into it. I don't have time.
Okay.
And I also studied composing with David Epstein. I thought I was going to become that rare entity, a woman conductor. But the North Hall fire happened. I lost all of the scores I was working on, plus my precious Martin guitar and everything else. And that was the end of that. This happened fairly early in my Antioch time. There's so many things I could tell you about that. No time. I bonded with Keith McGarry and loved his aesthetics class. One of our reading assignments was John Dewey's Art as Experience, and it had a profound effect on me. Recently, my friend Lori, who's on this call also, and I read the Dewey book and discussed it chapter by chapter. And all these years later, it still had a lot of relevance for me. I was honored in this class to be the liaison host for John Cage. For those of you who don't know, he's an avant-garde composer who used kind of in the moment sounds as compositions. And when he came to campus to meet with our aesthetics class, he also gave a concert, and he and I went for a walk in the Glen. And he awakened me to listening to the sounds while we were walking, all the sounds in the Glen, the forest, the birds and the trees and so on. And the Glen is a great nature preserve in that part of Ohio caused by glaciers. Everything else is flat. It's a fantastic place. My approach to writing music and making art has been mostly intuitive and free-flowing. He really influenced me subsequently in how I approached the making of art. Also brought to campus was Merce Cunningham's new dance troupe. And he and Cage collaborated. They did a fantastic piece there. I was just blown away. And both of them pushed the boundaries of what was possible in performance. Very much impacted me. We can go on to the next question now, Barry.
Well, sounds like a whole life happened at Antioch, but you left Antioch. And so tell about what you did after Antioch.
Yeah, and how I integrated.
How did you integrate all this into your professional life and the path you took?
All right, well, everyone who knows me knows that my driving force, and this has been true throughout my life, has been the exploration of creative process, regardless of the medium. That's why I can move from medium to medium, but what's fascinating me is how you manifest the whole internal life externally, and how things that are happening in the world also become part of some kind of intuitive way of putting material together. So my work evolved out of my life experiences and passions. I discovered Gestalt psychology when I was on a co-op job at Scribner's bookstore in New York City. I was mainly a human internet before the internet and worked up in the research department where people wrote in wanting to know where lines of a poem came from or something from a play or a quote. And my job was to find that. Sometimes I knew it, often I did not, but I knew how to find stuff. And I would, give them the information. And during the lunch period, the people on the art and psychology balcony would go out to lunch, and I would go down and take over for them while they were out. And when there was nobody in the store, I would peruse the books and pull things randomly off the shelves, things that I wasn't familiar with. And one day I saw a book called Gestalt Therapy by Fritz Perls, Hefferlein, and Goodman. And I had an epiphany. This was the way my brain was organized. It was a mixture of theory and experiential exercises. And I devoured it from cover to cover and reveled in the experiences that were provided in its pages. This mixture of my theater and arts education and experience with my study and practice of Gestalt and later Jungian psychology runs through all my subsequent work with individuals, groups, and organizations as an educator, trainer, coach, and presenter at many conferences. A few years after I graduated from Antioch, something unusual happened. This is a little story. My father's name is Sigmund Miller. There was a Broadway playwright named Sigmund Miller. We lived in the same, my parents and this guy lived in the same neighborhood near Broadway in the 80s. And occasionally, play scripts would come to my father instead of to that Sigmund Miller. My mother, without telling me, got this bright idea when one of these scripts arrived, a play called Masquerade, that she would call in a favor because they had kept sending these scripts to this guy. So she got in touch with him. She said, I have a daughter who just graduated from Antioch, was a theater major, and I would like you to audition her for this play. I mean, the chutzpah, really. When I found out about it, I was quite distressed. But anyway, he agreed to do it because my parents had been very good at sending him his scripts over the years. So the thing was called Masquerade, and the star was Cloris Leachman, who has just died recently. And it was going to be at the John Golden Theater on Broadway. It was in March of 1969. So I went, I met with this guy at a bar downtown. I noticed when he came in the door, I was sitting across, I got there early because I wanted to scope him out. The first thing that happened was that he tripped on the stairs up to the band stage. He comes over to the table and he puts the wrong end of a filter tip cigarette in his mouth. And I'm thinking, okay, there's something a little off about this guy. He tells me that the script is up in his office and it's just a block or two away. So we're going to go up there. And we go up there and he makes a pass at me. And I, like my mother before me, who had this experience, I say, nothing doing. I came here to get the script and that's all I'm getting. And he backed right off. So I knew that he was an insecure guy who was just trying to put a move on me. And the play, so I went for this audition. I was, I think, the first person to audition. And by the time I went to the audition, I had memorized the scene. And I did a great audition. And I think I was the first person that they auditioned. And then I went home and I forgot about it. Basically, I thought, oh, that was a fun experience. I mean, I was on a Broadway stage. When am I ever going to have this experience again? They called me a few days later and they told me that my audition was very good, but since I did not belong to equity, they could not hire me. It was the understudy for a Cloris Leachman. That was going to be my part. It was called Masquerade. And anyway, it opened and closed on March 16th, 1969. So I went to graduate school for an education degree and taught English and drama at James Monroe High School in the Bronx. And I developed a way of teaching creative writing that combined Gestalt with story writing. Basically, the students would become their main character that they were trying to develop in the story and develop the story from the inside out. No one else was teaching that way. I also worked with a class of kids from rough backgrounds and had them make up tall tales with lies and grandiosity built right in. They loved that, and it gave them permission to go over the top with the lies that they usually told. They just had a ball, and I had them make little books, and we put them in the school library, and some even made illustrations. And they learned that they could put their life experiences and their imagination into writing and drawing, which helped them deal with their often very difficult life circumstances. I went back to Antioch twice at the invitation of dear Louise Smith, who's here on the screen. And she directed and taught theater for many years. And one time I worked with the student cast on a play called Mad Forest by Carol Churchill. We looked at their dream images and used art and lines from the play to get deeper into their characters. Another time I worked with her on her auto performance class on the challenges of self-revelation when relating to an audience. And my friend and former theater professor, Dal, came in and demonstrated walking from the back of the stage to the edge of the stage, just walking and looking at the audience without saying a word. It was so powerful. I loved doing this work and could imagine having made it my career. My second marriage was to Bob Horn, a guy, I don't know if he's here on the call, but he intended to be, a guy who was and is a genius at analyzing information and presenting it creatively, who developed a field called information mapping and has combined art, education, and writing for his career. We did a lot of stuff together and were very involved with the human potential movement of the 70s. I wish I had time to share more about this, but I must forge ahead. Here's just one example of how I incorporated my arts background into my work with organizations. I met a woman at a UU church service who was one of a dozen course developers at a software company. We got to talking, and after she heard the kind of stuff I did, she said she thought that was just what her group needed. She arranged for me to meet with their boss, and I brought a 9-dot puzzle with me. You can ask me about that later if you want. He couldn't solve it, but its message was relevant to the objectives of his department, so he hired me. One of many exercises I did with them was to bring in a CD of a short Bach fugue and put a large printed version of the music up on a wall. Since they had to create instructional manuals using pictures and words and train instructors from other parts of the world to use them with their people, it was important for them to understand the impact of what they saw, heard, said, and wrote. 11 out of 12 of them could not read music. Their task was to match what they heard on the CD with what they saw on the wall, with occasional comments I would make about phrasing or note placement. They found out that some of them were more visual than auditory, and vice versa, and they had to use all the information available not just one part. Since this is what the instructors would ask their end users to do. I spent 4 days with them and basically invigorated their ways of approaching their work. And I heard from someone who stood behind them in the cafeteria a month later that the experience changed the way that whole group worked going forward. So we can go to the next question now.
You became involved with people who were trying different ways of expressing gender. And you actually wrote a book about it. And can you tell us about that? That's very popular now. Changing genders.
Can we show the book cover?
Trying things out. Yeah, we have that. Yeah, Susan will put that up.
Okay.
Well, I bought it and read it, and what to me it was so helpful.
Oh, good.
Somebody considering this.
Now, see, if you look at that book cover, can you see that that's the same person presenting in 2 different ways? And if that person actually helped me with this whole production. Okay, I need to go back to where we were. Okay. So I met a community leader named Ariadne Kane at an Association for Humanistic Psychology conference. And I invited him to meet with a counseling group I was training at the time. And halfway through, he changed to a femme presentation. We did conference sessions together, and he invited me to Fantasia Fair, where I did workshops and counseling for 27 years, for a week, every October. I started in 1982 when most gender expression was with cross-dressers. So I wrote my book in 1996 because I couldn't find anything for counselors to guide them working with this population. And here's a little story. I had a cross-dressing experience, and you know, it's interesting when people are used to seeing you one way, then they see you another way and they don't know who you are exactly. So the language predicament was a major thing. A lot's changed since then. Young people are inventing their own identity language and a presentation, including gender fluidity, where they refuse to be categorized. 15
years ago, you discovered something totally new, and now it's consumed you, and you are consuming it. Talk about that. Something called Second Life.
Yeah, for the past 14 years, I've inhabited Second Life. It's a virtual 3-dimensional world on the computer. And it allows me to meet people from all over the world, do tons of creative and educational projects, do coaching and counseling, create to my heart's content, and enjoy the creations of others as well as have many collaborations on projects. I've discovered all sorts of talented people and projects that I would never have run across in my usual life. So this is inside Second Life, and I'm doing an individual coaching session with a symbolic model. I call it an inside out process. And people make different bills that represent stuff. People have all kinds of interests. They do all kinds of presentations. They create like mad. It's a very, very interesting place. And I spend part of my time there coaching different groups. I I have a Shakespeare theater thing. I've got all kinds of things that go on in Second Life. I recommend it for people who want to find a way not to have to leave their home or their computer screen, but to be going all kinds of places and doing all kinds of creative things. Interactions with people who are in different fields, and I will consult with them about how to use this or that, use theater performance to enhance what it is they're doing. Neela's mom and my mom were friends, met at Hunter College. That's Joan. Oh, that's cute. I didn't know that. I didn't remember that, Joan. Steve Pearls, yes, he was at Antioch with us, creating a story from the inside out. I mean, there are a lot of comments here.
Can you say any more about what creating a story from the inside out means?
Taking something that's actually happened to you or has affected you in some way, and then seeing how you want to offer it to an audience or out there so that it will make sense to them. You're actually sharing your experience in some way that's going to bring it alive for other people.
Niela, I just wanted to say this is the book you were talking about. It's the Fritz Perls book. I inherited it from Dal. Patty gave me some of Dal's books. So it's this Gestalt therapy book. And I just wanted to mention a workshop you did as part of an alumni reunion. You did a Gestalt workshop at Antioch with alumni and asked us to pick an object. And I remember picking a very plain salt shaker on a diner table that then became a whole character and a whole set of motivations and a world. So that's like, what is it? Outside in, inside out. It was quite profound experience being a salt shaker, which is a fantastic metaphor for where I was at the time.
Well, and also it's part of the Gestalt
yes.
zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
To become things that you're trying to have a bigger understanding about.
I remember our Lower East Side adventures fondly. You gave sumptuous brunches.
I see Robin says inside out is essentially what I do when writing a play. It's an interesting way of expressing the process. Yeah.
Niela, I'm leading a talk on LGBTQ or all those numbers, letters next fall. And I'm interested in getting your book. Is it on Amazon?
I haven't looked for a while.
Niela has a website, and I think you can get it on the web or a link to it on the website.
On Niela's website?
Peoplesystemspotential.com. Peoplesystemspotential.com.
Okay, thanks.
So a lot's changed since then. Young people are inventing their own identity language and presentation, including gender fluidity, where they refuse to be categorized. So my unique contribution to that world is something I call symbolic modeling. So I have projects in both places, in Second Life and in my physical life, and feel as though this feeds my soul and my imagination in a balanced way. It's free to join if anyone on this call is curious. So
could you talk a little bit more about the kinds of people that you've worked with in your workshops? I mean, the range of.
Oy vey. I've worked with creatives, with transsexuals, with cross-dressers, with managers of people. I mean, I could go on for a long time. People who work with people creatively and educationally and in other ways. Lots and lots of. Everybody dreams. Everybody dreams. So they go to the theater at night when they're sleeping.
Okay.
So I can refer to experiences that they have that relate in some way to make-believe or theater experiences. Dreams is certainly one way. but also working with different kinds of people and being able to be adaptable about how do you decide when you're working with this group, what's the best route in, as opposed to this group over here, which may take a very different way of getting in. Yeah.
Tony here.
Where are you, dear?
I don't know.
Oh,
where
there
I
you
was.
are. There you are.
If you could talk a little bit more about working with transgender people in terms of doing that coming from a straight world and doing that relatively early in terms of the public awareness. What was sort of particularly illuminating to you?
First of all, that they're human beings,
Uh-huh.
like all of us. And we have that in common. And
Yeah.
so we had certain experiences that are identical. All right. Second has to do with having been in plays that most people have had some form of play experience, or where they're pretending or doing things that are not part of their regular identity.
Yeah.
And there are other things like that, but it was very easy for me, because of my theater background, to enter right into that trans world. And to recognize that for those people who are dressing up as some other gender, it's not a part in a play. It's a much deeper experience for them.
But it was great. I mean, everything you had to say was terrific.
Oh, great. I haven't even had a chance to read all these fabulous comments.
I just wanted to remind people that Niela's website includes some interesting links and some very interesting interviews she had, generally related to Gestalt. And we're going to, as you can say your goodbyes, Niela, and then we were going to play one of your compositions.
All right, well, I want to talk about the Shakespeare Theater.
Okay.
Because I was so lucky to be at Antioch and have it coincide from 52 to 57 with the Shakespeare Under the Stars. And so when I went into my virtual world of Second Life, I wanted to have Shakespeare represented, one of my favorite people, Shakespeare. So we built a virtual Shakespeare stage in Second Life, and we invited people to come for different kinds of events that involved Shakespeare. And actually that it's still in there. I still do that occasionally. So it was just wonderful having people, even people who'd never been exposed to Shakespeare in the virtual world. We could do that. We could make a stage and invite people and have people experience things.
You invite them to be in the performance or as audience?
No.
As audience.
There were the program I did in there, it was much too much to do whole production, was called Shakespeare's Monologues. All right. And so people would learn, different people who were interested in acting and so on would learn monologues from different plays. And then they would find a costume in the virtual world. They'd find a costume. They'd find a piece of art or make a piece of art that was representative of their character. They'd find music, they'd find dance, they'd find whatever they wanted to bring to this experience. And then we'd have an event called Shakespeare's Monologues, never more than 5 people at a time. And each person would be on a stage, the stage that we built. was a Shakespeare stage, a virtual Shakespeare stage. They did their monologue in their costume, having gone and gotten the costume from somewhere in the world. Then there might have been other people on the stage that they were interacting with. They made a sculpture or a piece of art that in some way represented the inner life of that character. And then we did a combination of having them do the monologue.
With their real voices, they themselves were speaking?
Yes, they were doing the monologue.
Okay.
In their costume.
Yeah.
And then interacting with the audience about the archetype that was represented by that character, how it exists in the modern world, and how some of the people in the audience have experienced what that character experienced in some way or other. And
Pretty
it's
complicated.
a very, very interesting process. I'd like to invite all of you to investigate Second Life. That's what it's called, secondlife.com. And my name in there is, I'm going to put it in the chat bar so you get the spelling right. If I can, to everyone, is Marley Molina. And Molina, of course, is an anagram of Niela M. So if you're interested, I'd love to show some of the people here, some of the wonders of that virtual world.
I would like to recommend to everyone that they at least take a look at Niela's website, which basically is a document of her entire life.
I'm putting it in the chat also for people who didn't get it in some other way.
Yeah, I think we have it at the end. But like Barry said at the beginning, Niela is so expansive and creative and spontaneous, and yet she has this perfectly organized website with all her interviews. I mean, everything she's done is documented there, and everything you go to has more parts to it. It's really fascinating.
You can also go to YouTube and plug in her name, and you'll get a lot of videos of her work. And even, yes.
I didn't expect to be plugged. Also, I loved going back to campus twice and working with Louise. That was just so much fun. We've kind of stayed in touch over the years. And one was an auto performance class. And one was Carol Churchill's Mad Forest, a play that she was working on with people. And that play is so crazy. People were having dreams. You know, there are characters in that are not human. And they were having dreams of different kinds of characters. It was tremendous. It was just great working with those classes.
I could ask Susan whether she is ready to play your composition called Bobby.
Playing with Bobby. He is an improviser and jazz pianist. The whole process of making music, the process of creating a character, the process of writing something. What are the things what's the through line, no matter what creative process you're working on? What is the through line in all of this? That's why I call myself a creativist, because I don't stay with just one medium. So theater was one of the many mediums that I've worked with on this creative process, just so people understand that. That they were all important to me, but this one is the theater and performance one. And Barry is the daughter of one of my favorite people in my life, Meredith Dal, who was my theater professor at Antioch, and Paula Treichler, here somewhere, was, there she is, the daughter of my other theater professor, Paul Treichler. And they're the ones who created this wonderful theater and performance group.
Okay.
I think we should wind it up.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Neela, thank you
indeed.
so much. It was wonderful. Thank all of you for coming.
We're going to play an original tune by Miss Niela Miller, who's a regular here in the Acton Jazz Cafe, and she's written a little bebop tune called "Playing with Bobby," and we're gonna see if we can do it. Hope you enjoy. One, two, 3.
Thank you.